Hi, I'm Evelyn.
I was 17 when the lawyer handed me a sealed envelope and said, with careful words and a face too smooth, that my father had left everything to be split equally between me and my sister. That should have been the end of it. A simple inheritance. A small house on the outskirts of Maple Ridge, a bank account with a few thousand saved, and a dusty old music shop downtown with our family name on the windows. But nothing is simple when grief sits between sisters, especially when one of them knows how to lie without blinking. The day of the will reading, Clara had shown up in black heels too sharp for our father's funeral, her hair perfectly curled, her eyes dry. She smiled at the lawyer like she already knew what he was going to say. I didn't. I was still sitting there in my only clean dress, chewing on my thumbnail like I was 12 again, wondering how she'd managed to look like a stranger in our father's favorite tie-pin. Clara had left town 5 years ago, promising to find herself, build something, escape what she called the weight of small places. She never wrote, never called, and now here she was, nodding like this was just another business transaction. That should have warned me, but I was too busy trying not to cry. In the weeks that followed, Clara took over everything. She said she'd handle the paperwork, the property deeds, the bank transfers. She told me to grieve in peace. She even bought me a bottle of wine with the estate card and said something about how I needed to relax. Then one day, she was gone. The house was empty, the shop keys missing, and the joint account we were supposed to share had been drained down to $12.19. I stared at the bank screen for so long, I thought my eyes would bleed. Every cent gone. She left no note, no address, no number. Just vanished. It took me a month to realize she had used my name to do it. Forged signatures. Fake IDs. Even the house was listed under a trust she had filed behind my back. The police told me it was a civil issue. The lawyer refused to answer my calls. And every time I tried to tell someone, they looked at me like I was crazy. Like sisters don't steal whole lives and walk away. But Clara did. I lost everything in one season. The house was foreclosed within 6 months. The music shop, which I had started to clean out in hopes of reopening, was sold to a real estate developer who wanted to turn it into a vape lounge. I ended up renting a room above a laundromat 3 towns over, working double shifts at a diner that smelled like bleach and broken dreams. People always think betrayal is loud. Screaming. Throwing things. A courtroom maybe. But no one talks about the quiet part, the dull ache that sits in your throat every morning when you remember that someone you once shared a bedroom with decided you were disposable. I used to stare at the ceiling fan above my mattress and wonder if she even thought about me. If she lay in some fancy condo, sipping stolen wine, laughing about the girl too slow to see it coming. But thoughts like that only rot you from the inside. So I stopped. I learned to forget her. Or I tried. Years passed. I kept my head down, worked my shifts, paid my rent. I started teaching music on weekends to kids who didn't care what I'd lost, only that I could show them how to play something that sounded like hope. It was enough to survive, not enough to live. Then, everything changed in one stupid moment, in a grocery store, of all places. A man was having a heart attack in the bread aisle. People screamed. Someone yelled for help. I didn't think. I just moved. My dad used to be an EMT before the shop, and I remembered the steps. I did chest compressions until the paramedics arrived. I thought that was the end of it. But someone had recorded the whole thing. A teenager, maybe. The clip went viral. Woman saves man in store. That was the headline. My face, pale and shocked, covered every news channel for 3 days. I was offered interviews. I turned most of them down. But one station, the biggest one in the state, asked me to come on for a live segment. I said yes. Maybe part of me wanted to be seen again, even if just for a second. The lights were too bright in the studio. My hands shook, but I smiled, answered their questions, told them I wasn't a hero, just someone who had a good father who taught her to stay calm. I was about to leave when one of the producers stopped me and said there was someone in the lobby asking to see me. I said no. I was tired. He looked confused. He said she claimed to be my sister. I felt everything inside me drop, like a stone in a lake. 5 years of silence. 5 years of living like I'd been erased. And now, after one moment of visibility, she had appeared. I didn't go out to see her. I didn't want the cameras to catch whatever would happen if I did. But I asked for a name. They said she didn't leave one. Just said she needed to talk to me. That she was sorry. I walked out the back door of the studio, past the dumpsters, past the smokers, past the glowing sign with my name misspelled in lights. I didn't stop until I reached my car. That night, I barely slept. I locked the windows. I watched the shadows. I expected her to show up again. But she didn't. Not at my apartment. Not at the diner. Nowhere. It was almost worse than if she had. Like she'd poked her head back into my world just to remind me that she could. The news kept playing my interview. My inbox was full. Strangers called me brave. Kids at the music center wanted to take selfies. And in the middle of all that noise, I was waiting for a ghost. Days turned into weeks. I started to think maybe it wasn't her. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe some woman who looked like Clara had heard the name and decided to take a shot at redemption. But then the package came. No return address. No name. Just my handwriting on the label, copied perfectly. Inside was a small, crumpled photograph of the two of us, me and Clara, maybe 9 and 11, sitting on the porch steps of the old house. We were both laughing. The picture had been torn and taped back together. And on the back, in faded ink, she had written one line. I didn't know it would end like this. I stared at that photo for hours. Every memory came back like fire, her hiding under the blankets with me during storms, us stealing cookies from the shop, her holding my hand at Dad's funeral. I hated her. I loved her. I wanted her gone. I wanted her to knock on my door. My chest felt too tight. I didn't know what she meant by end. I didn't know if she was sick, or in trouble, or just playing another game. But one thing was clear. She had seen my face on that screen, and something had shifted. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. That after years of silence, a story was about to unravel. And I didn't know yet if it would end with forgiveness, or something far worse. I kept the photograph in my bedside drawer, buried under receipts and tangled headphones. Every night I told myself I wouldn't look at it again, and every night my fingers found their way to that drawer, pulling it out like a habit I couldn't break. Her handwriting on the back haunted me. I didn't know it would end like this. And how? It wasn't like Clara to speak in riddles. She'd always been sharp, clean, direct like a blade. That single sentence was the only thing that didn't make sense, and maybe that's what made it so dangerous. The next time I saw her, it wasn't in person. It was in a background blur of a security camera photo that a friend from the diner shoved into my hands. She was scrolling a conspiracy forum for fun, something about missing persons and secret identities, when she saw it. A thread titled, "Do you recognize this woman?" A grainy still from a gas station outside Phoenix, time-stamped just 3 days ago. The face was half-turned, the eyes hidden by sunglasses, but I'd know that posture anywhere. It was Clara, my sister. Thousands of miles from Maple Ridge. Alive. Hiding. The post was full of speculation. Some people thought she was a scammer. Others believed she was linked to a corporate leak, maybe whistleblowing. A few tinfoil hat types claimed she was deep undercover in something involving offshore accounts. But none of them knew the truth. She wasn't a mystery. She was a thief. And she was mine. That photo lit something up in me. A fire I had kept buried beneath exhaustion and shame. I started digging. Not just Googling. Real digging. I remembered the login to Dad's old email, buried deep in one of his paper notebooks I had managed to save before the house was sold. I searched his messages. Clara had written to him. Once. 6 years ago. A single email. It was short and vague. But it had an IP address. I traced it. The location pinged outside Nevada. Nothing concrete. But it was a thread. And I pulled. For the next few weeks, my life split in half. By day, I taught piano and poured coffee and smiled. By night, I became someone else. Someone obsessive. I joined missing person forums. I searched for shell companies. I emailed old contacts from the music shop days, people Dad used to talk about with lowered voices. And slowly, a picture started to emerge. Clara hadn't just taken my inheritance. She had taken a whole new life. In Arizona, she was known as Elise Rayner. She lived in a luxury condo under a shell lease. She had a dog named Winter, drove a gray BMW, and volunteered at a local art gallery. I stared at her profile on the gallery staff page. Her hair was darker now, shorter. But her smile was the same. My stomach turned. She hadn't just vanished. She had erased me and built herself into someone else. I booked a one-way bus ticket. It took 2 days to get there. 2 days of plastic seats, bad coffee, and long stares out of the window. I didn't know what I'd do when I saw her. Part of me imagined walking up to her on the sidewalk and screaming. Another part of me wanted to sit down, ask her why, and maybe, just maybe, hear her say she was sorry. But none of that happened. Because when I arrived, I didn't find Clara. I found her absence. Her condo was empty. Her mailbox was stuffed. A neighbor said she hadn't seen Elise in over a week. The gallery staff said she had taken a sudden leave of absence. Her dog was gone too. It was like she had vanished again, this time just ahead of me. But she'd left a trace. A small brown envelope taped inside her condo mailbox with my name on it. Inside was a hotel room keycard and a short message on the back of a dry cleaning receipt. You're close, but you don't know the whole story. The keycard belonged to a mid-range hotel near the city outskirts. Room 410. I didn't check in at the front desk. I used the staff elevator and found the room myself. My hands were shaking when I slid the card. The door unlocked with a soft click. The room was empty, but it wasn't untouched. There were takeout containers in the trash, a coat over the chair, and on the desk, something that stopped my breath. A thick folder labeled in red marker, for her. Inside were documents. Dozens of them. Bank statements. Transaction histories. Property records. All tied to one name, James Petrov. I didn't know the name, but Clara did. There were photos too. Clara with him. Clara in the background of a conference hall. Clara standing on a pier, handing off something in a manila envelope. It didn't make sense. But it wasn't just theft. It wasn't just me. She was involved in something bigger. One photo in particular made my hands go cold. It was Clara, clearly bruised, standing beside a black SUV with tinted windows. And on the back, in her handwriting, "They weren't supposed to follow me. They weren't supposed to find you." I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to breathe. This wasn't about a will anymore. This was something else. Something deeper. The lights in the room flickered once. I heard a knock at the door. Not hard. Just one tap. I didn't move. I waited. Nothing. Then a slip of paper was pushed beneath the door. Just one line. "Leave now or she dies." I ran to the hallway, but it was empty.
No footsteps. No hecho.
Whoever had written it was already gone. I grabbed the folder and left through the fire exit. My phone buzzed as I hit the sidewalk. Unknown number. A text. "You're being watched. Don't go back to your hotel." I felt my whole body tighten. I wasn't ready. I had stepped into something too big. But it was too late. I couldn't unsee what I had seen. And more than that, I couldn't unfeel the guilt that was beginning to twist inside me. That night, I sat in a 24-hour diner with my back to the wall and the folder on my lap. I read every page. James Petrov was a mid-level financier, suspected of laundering millions through non-profit foundations. Clara, under her new name, had worked at one of those non-profits. At first, it was probably innocent. A way to earn money, stay hidden. But the records showed payments to her name. Unusual ones. Transfers marked consulting and facilitation. She wasn't just running from me.
She was running from them.
Whoever they were. That last note, "They weren't supposed to find you," hit me like glass. My interview had made me visible. And because we looked alike, because someone could connect the dots, I was now part of a story I didn't choose.
I made a choice then.
I would find her. Not for revenge. Not for justice, but because someone else already was. And they were closer than I'd ever imagined. I left the diner, folder tucked under my coat, and walked into the night not knowing where the next piece would fall, but sure that Clara was still alive, still watching, and waiting for me to decide what I'd do next. The air outside the diner felt heavier than before, like it was soaked with eyes I couldn't see. I kept the folder pressed close to my chest as I moved through the half-lit streets, my heartbeat too loud in my ears. I didn't know where I was going, only that staying still meant being caught, and I hadn't come this far to vanish the same way Clara did. I found a cheap motel 2 towns over, paid in cash, and didn't use my real name. The room smelled like mildew and bleach, and the curtains didn't close all the way, but it gave me 4 walls and a lock. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the folder again, this time with a pen in hand. I marked names, circled connections, drew lines that didn't quite meet, but hummed with the promise of something sinister. The more I looked, the clearer it became. Clara hadn't stolen the inheritance just for greed. She had done it to disappear, to fund an escape from whatever dark game she had stepped into. But the twist that tightened my stomach was this. Somewhere along the way, she stopped running just from them and started running from herself. Buried between pages of transactions and blurry photos was another envelope, smaller, sealed with wax the same color as dried blood. Inside was a single flash drive. I plugged it into my old laptop, holding my breath. A video file loaded. When I clicked play, the screen flickered, and there she was.
Clara.
Sitting in a dark room, hair pulled back, no makeup, eyes that looked like they hadn't seen sleep in days. She didn't speak right away, just stared. Then finally, she whispered my name. Not like she was talking to me, but like she was remembering me. She said she was sorry. Not for taking the money, not for disappearing, but for not protecting me. She said that after she left, she got involved with the wrong people. That it started with a job recommendation, easy money, she said. But it wasn't easy. And it wasn't money. It was access. She had unknowingly opened a backdoor into Dad's music shop records, which were tied to old ledgers and shell accounts he'd used during his brief time working with a private arts fund. That fund, she said, was never about art. It was about laundering. She didn't know, at first. But when she did find out, she tried to pull away. That's when the threats began. She said she used the inheritance to run, to buy silence, to bury trails that could lead back to me. That she forged my name because it gave her enough distance to disappear behind the noise of her own betrayal. She cried, just once, and then her face went hard again. She said there was a meeting set for Thursday, 2 nights from when I watched the video. A warehouse on the edge of an industrial park. She'd go alone if she had to, but she didn't know what would happen. She ended with one line. If you see this, it means I didn't make it back. The screen went black. I sat frozen, the silence of the room pressing into my bones like cold water. She wasn't hiding from me. She was leaving a breadcrumb trail because she thought no one else would look. But I was looking. I had always been. I copied the address and destroyed the drive. Then I started calling in favors, small ones, from a life I had tried to forget. One of Dad's old friends, who used to work security for private events, still owed him a favor. He met me in the parking lot of a closed-down cinema and handed me a prepaid burner phone and an address to a safe house just in case. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to know what he knew. I just said thank you. The next day, I scouted the warehouse. It sat at the edge of an abandoned freight line, rusted siding, cracked windows, no signage. From across the street, I counted 3 men going in and none coming out. One had a walkie. Another had a scar that split his eyebrow. They didn't look like warehouse employees. They looked like endings. I waited until night fell, then moved. I kept low, dressed in black, my heartbeat synced to the crunch of gravel under my shoes. There was a side door, locked but old. I used a screwdriver from the diner's maintenance closet and popped it open with a click that sounded too loud in the stillness. Inside, the air smelled like oil and secrets. I heard voices, low, sharp, urgent. I stayed in the shadows and followed them. down a hallway, past crates that looked too clean, too uniform. I stopped at the edge of a large open room, shielded by steel beams. Clara stood in the center. She looked thinner. Her hands were at her sides. Across from her stood a man in a gray suit, expensive, calm. He held a folder in one hand. He said her name, her fake one, like it was the only one he'd ever known. Then he tossed the folder at her feet and told her this was her last chance. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard enough. They wanted her to disappear again, this time not by choice. He said something about an audit, about a leak. He said her sister's little hero moment on TV had made things complicated, that the board was nervous, that they couldn't afford anyone asking questions. Clara didn't flinch. She told him she had proof, that if anything happened to her, it would go public, that someone else already had the files. My breath caught. She was bluffing. Or she wasn't. Maybe she knew I'd come. Maybe that was the point. The man stepped closer. He raised his hand. And that's when I moved. I didn't have a plan. Only instinct. I picked up a rusted pipe from the floor and swung it against the wall hard enough to crash the silence. Everyone turned. In the chaos, I grabbed Clara's arm and we ran. Through the side door. Into the dark. Not stopping until our lungs were burning. She didn't speak at first. Neither did I. But when we did stop, when we finally reached a streetlight and looked at each other for the first time in 5 years, she whispered my name like it was something holy. And I slapped her. Then I hugged her. And we cried like kids who had finally stopped pretending we were fine. But we weren't fine. We were still hunted. And now they knew we were together. Clara took me to a storage unit 3 blocks down. Inside was a second folder, hidden in a violin case. Everything. Names. Transfers. Passwords. Photos. And one final bomb. Dad's name. He hadn't just worked with the fund. He had been the one who helped build it before he left. Before he disappeared into small-town silence and tried to become someone else. Clara found out after he died. And that's why she ran. Not because she was guilty, but because she had inherited more than money. She had inherited danger. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the concrete floor and read every page twice. Clara was right. If this ever went public, people would fall. People with power. With reach. With enough fear to kill for silence. And now they would come for both of us. But I had been invisible for too long. And I was done running. Tomorrow I would go back to the city. And for once, I would be the one writing the story. We waited until just before dawn to move. Clara insisted on taking a back route through the industrial park, past shipping containers and storage lots where no one cared who came or went, and even less about where they ended up. She had changed her clothes, pulled her hair back, and stuffed the evidence folder into the bottom of an old violin case, as if we were just two musicians heading to a lesson rather than two fugitives holding the keys to a financial empire built on lies. I asked her how deep this really went.
She didn't look at me.
Just said it wasn't about money anymore. It was about leverage, about silence, about the kind of secrets that could bury a family and build a fortune all at once. She said Petrov wasn't just a middleman, he was a gatekeeper, one who kept records of everyone who passed through his system. And now we had those records, which meant we were more valuable missing than alive. We made it back into the city as the sun rose through a fogged-up skyline. Clara used a payphone to call someone she said she trusted. A journalist named Mara who had covered corruption scandals years ago and lost everything for it. Clara said she was the only one who would know how to move without alerting the wrong people. We waited in a greasy diner with cracked booths and coffee that tasted like wet ash until Mara showed up. She was older than I expected, her hair streaked with gray, her coat too big, her eyes sharp as glass. She sat without a word, took the folder, flipped through it with the calm of someone who'd already seen worse, and then looked up and asked us one question. Did we want justice, or did we want survival? The choice hit harder than I expected. Because in all my chasing, all my anger and grief, I had never stopped to ask what I wanted from Clara, revenge or answers. And now, sitting there, Both of us in borrowed lives with nothing left but this one brittle truth. I realized I didn't want her punished. I just wanted it to matter.
For what Dad did.
For what she risked. For what we both lost. So we told Mara. We wanted it told, all of it. She nodded once, then slipped the folder into her bag and gave us a room number at a downtown hotel under a different name. She told us to disappear for 3 days. That if she wasn't there to meet us by then, we'd know they had found her too. The hotel room was small, quiet, and high up enough to feel detached from the city below. Clara paced. I stared at the ceiling. At one point, we ordered room service and neither of us ate it. Asked her what happened after she left me. How she disappeared so completely. She told me she never meant to. That she'd panicked when she saw Dad's name in those files. That she was terrified someone would come after me. So she ran and she hid, and she built a lie to keep herself alive. But the lie grew teeth, and it started eating her from the inside out. She said she watched my interview in a hotel lobby, coffee in hand, her new life hanging like a mask she didn't know how to remove. She said seeing me reminded her of who she used to be, who we used to be, and that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. 3 days passed. No word from Mara. On the morning of the 4th, we turned on the hotel TV. The channel flickered to a breaking news banner. It wasn't about us, not yet. It was about a city official resigning due to financial misconduct. Then another. And then a leak. Whistleblower allegations. A non-profit named in a federal inquiry. Clara sat very still. I felt my chest tighten. Mara had done it, but not all at once. She had done what good journalists do. Pulled the string slowly, enough to unravel the tapestry without setting it on fire. But it also meant we were exposed. The story was growing, and somewhere in those growing shadows, someone would be searching for the source. We had to move again. We left the hotel that night, Clara wearing a wig she bought from a thrift shop, me in a hoodie 3 sizes too big. We took a train north, got off halfway, then a bus, then a cab. We ended up in a quiet town near the border, where the trees grew close together and the streets were always half empty. There was a cabin there, a safe house Mara had arranged long ago, in a life before ours. We settled in, unsure of what came next. The days blurred. We took walks at dusk. I taught Clara how to play a basic scale on the old upright piano in the living room. She laughed the way she used to when we were kids, soft, surprised, like happiness was a language she had forgotten but still understood. But peace never lasts. Not when you're carrying secrets with teeth. On the 6th night, a car pulled up to the edge of the woods. Black. Tinted windows. It didn't move. It didn't leave. We watched from the attic. The next morning, tire tracks led back toward the road. That afternoon, the phone rang. It wasn't connected to a number. Just static. Then a voice. Not Petrov. Someone colder. They said Clara had 36 hours to return what she took. That if she didn't, I would disappear the same way she almost had. Clara didn't speak after that. She just sat by the window and stared at the trees. I thought she might run again. But that night, she packed the folder back into the violin case, zipped it shut, and said one thing. This ends now. No more running. I followed her, even though I didn't know where we were going. Even though I was terrified. Because somewhere along the way, the sister I thought I lost had started becoming the one I remembered. We drove through the night, back toward the city, toward whatever ending was waiting. We didn't know if Mara was still alive. We didn't know who was left to trust. But we knew one thing. The story was out now. And someone somewhere had decided that meant we were dangerous. I didn't know it yet, but the final confrontation was already waiting for us. In the very place our story had begun. In a music shop with our family name still faded on the windows. Where the truth had always been hiding. In silence, in secrets, and in song. The shop was exactly as we had left it. Boarded windows, dust-fogged glass, the ghost of our family name barely visible beneath cracked gold lettering. It was strange stepping back inside. The door creaked the same way it used to when we'd sneak in after dark to swipe Dad's cinnamon mints. The smell was still there too, under the dust and disuse, aged paper, varnished wood, something old and familiar. I ran my fingers across the piano in the corner. The keys were yellowed, uneven. But when I pressed one, it sang, soft and clear, like it remembered me. Clara stood in the doorway for a long time, her eyes scanning the shadows like she expected Dad to emerge from them, laughing, telling us we were too late for dinner again. But this wasn't a memory. This was a trap we were setting. We had come full circle, back to where the cracks had first formed in our lives. And this time, we weren't here to grieve. We were here to finish it. We didn't call anyone. We didn't alert the press. We simply opened the shutters, cleaned just enough to make it look like something was being rebuilt, and waited. Clara placed the violin case behind the counter, nestled it inside a false panel Dad had built when we were kids, the same one we used to hide our candy stash in. We left the front door unlocked. We turned on the lights. And then we waited. Hours passed. The street outside remained quiet. A cat wandered by. A delivery truck rumbled through without stopping. We thought maybe we were wrong. Maybe they wouldn't come. Maybe the leak had scared them off. But around 4:27 p.m., the bell above the shop door rang. The man who entered wasn't Petrov. He was younger, sharper, with cold eyes and the kind of presence that said he wasn't used to being told no. He didn't introduce himself. Didn't look around. He walked straight to the counter and asked where the folder was. Clara stood still. I stepped forward, my heart thudding so loudly I thought he might hear it. I told him we had what he wanted, but that it was already gone. Sent to 5 other people. If we disappeared, those people would go public. The man smiled, not the warm kind, the cruel kind. He said something about how everyone had a price, and that some sisters were easier to break than others. Then he leaned forward and told me this was my last chance to walk away. He even opened the door for me. But I didn't move. I couldn't. I thought of Dad, of the house he'd tried to turn into a refuge, of the way he'd folded that Juilliard letter with such care. I thought of the piano, of the empty seat at every family photo, of the years I'd spent thinking I was forgotten. I wasn't going to walk away now. So I told him the only thing I could think of. Try me. He stepped forward. Clara moved to block him. And then, from the back room, another door opened. Mara, disheveled but alive, a recording device in hand, red light blinking. She'd arrived through the alley as planned. She had filmed everything. The man's face drained of color. He reached for something, maybe a weapon, maybe a phone. But before he could act, 2 more figures stepped inside. Not allies. Not enemies. Law enforcement. Quiet, plain-clothed, and fast. Within seconds, the man was on the ground, handcuffed, furious. Mara said nothing. She just handed the recorder to one of the agents and nodded once. It was done. The weeks that followed moved like slow motion. Arrests. Investigations. Statements. Clara testified before a closed panel, her voice steady even when her hands trembled. The nonprofit was shut down. Petrov disappeared. Rumors of an escape across the border, but no proof. Some said he was silenced by the very people he worked for. Others said he was hiding in plain sight. But it didn't matter anymore. The machine was broken. The people behind it exposed. As for us, we didn't become famous. We didn't write a book or go on a press tour. We moved back into the shop, renovated it, reopened it under a new name, Second Verse. We turned it into a small community music center, less profit, more purpose. Kids from the neighborhood came in unsure at first, then excited. I taught them piano. Clara taught basic composition. Sometimes we'd play together, not because we were trying to reclaim something, but because it felt like breathing again. There were still scars. Still nights when Clara would wake up gasping from dreams she didn't want to remember. Still afternoons when I'd find myself staring too long at the door, waiting for someone who wasn't coming. But we had made peace with the past. Not by erasing it, but by finally speaking it aloud. One morning, months later, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a photograph. An old one. Us, sitting on the front steps, younger than we remembered, sun in our eyes, the future wide open. On the back, in handwriting I hadn't seen in years, was a single line. "I always knew you'd make it right." It was Dad's. Written long ago, perhaps never meant to be sent. I framed it, hung it above the piano. Not as an ending, but as a promise. I used to think Clara took everything from me. But the truth is, she gave me something too. The truth. The fight. The understanding that silence doesn't protect, it erases. And that sometimes the only way to be heard is to play louder than the world that tried to mute you. So now, every evening, I sit by the window as the sun goes down, and I play. Not for the past. Not for revenge. But because music is truth. And in truth, I finally found my way home.